Yesterday, the European Parliament took, frankly, the unprecedented step to initiate what's called the Article 7 process against the nation of Hungary, which, if it goes all the way, this Article 7 process, I don't think it will, but if it does, then it would effectively strip Hungary of its voting rights in the EU Assembly. The article has never been previously invoked before. 448 Eurocrats voted in favor of the measure, 197 voted against it, 48 abstained. Now, the vote involved accepting what's called the Sargentini report, which is authored by a far left-wing Eurocrat named Judith Sargentini, who it documents the supposed democratic abuses of Hungary and calls for the implementation of Article 7. They're citing things like Hungary's crackdown on George Soros and the Central European universities, infringements upon academic freedom. They're citing cases of violating the line of separation between the legislature and the judiciary. And of course, they're citing Hungary's refusal to take in its share of the immigration refugee quotas dictated by Brussels. The Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó is calling the adopting of the Sargentini report as nothing more than what he calls petty revenge by pro-migration politicians. And he pointed out, really, the whole thing is basically null and void since it was passed through the breaching of the voting rules of the European Parliament, where normally abstentions are counted as votes against adopting the report, which they weren't in this case. Now, the irony in this whole procedure was not lost on our good old Nigel Farage, the British member of UKIP, leader of the Brexit movement. He was there for the vote. And we should, and by the way, most British representatives voted against adopting the Sargentini report. They voted with Orban. And Farage stood up and he gave an impassioned speech on behalf of Viktor Orban. And he noted the painful irony that the very Eurocrats who are faulting Hungary for not acting according to democratic values have themselves not been elected. They are all appointed Eurocrats accountable to no citizen, no voter, no nation. They're accountable to no populace whatsoever. And he pointed out that this was nothing more than just a kangaroo court, very similar to what we saw with the media during the press conference between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The media had already reached their verdict, and the court was just there to find something ex post facto to justify the previously reached verdict. Now, I don't know if this is a fight that the European Parliament really wants to have, especially in view of the upcoming elections in May. In many respects, it's just going to galvanize the nationalist right, who are already they're creating these transnational alliances like the ones advocated by Italy's Matteo Salvini and most recently by Steve Bannon, the former architect of President Trump's successful campaign. So I'm really not sure what these Eurocrats think they're going to get out of this. What the adoption of the Sargentini report made absolutely clear is that the Eurocrats who control Brussels see the European Union as a secular, liberal, globalist world order. They are unelected Eurocrats led by the globalists in France and Germany who unwaveringly stand for open borders. They stand for overturning sovereign, democratically sustained national sovereignty. They stand for economic processes that benefit the privileged in the financial centers in urban areas while transporting industrial and manufacturing jobs to third world nations in the global south. They absolutely stand for overturning traditional customs and traditional morality, for metropolitan-inspired alternative lifestyle values and narcissistic consumerism. So where do we go from here? Well, in terms of the EU itself, don't expect a lot, at least anytime soon. The Council of the European Union, which is made up of representatives from the EU member nations, that council is the next administrative body that's going to decide what to do next. And as things stand, the council would need at least a 4/5 majority to move forward with any disciplinary action against Hungary. And in terms of that, you know, Politico, the website there, does a nice job of showing how hard this is going to be to accomplish. And they cite the case that's already going on with Poland. The European Commission triggered Article 7 proceedings against Poland last December for reasons very similar to what they're doing here with Hungary. And here we are nearly a year later, and they still have yet to reach a decision on the matter. So obviously we're not looking to see any real action against Hungary in any time soon. Certainly not before the European Parliament elections in May. Regardless, few analysts actually think Article 7 is going to be implemented fully. They doubt very highly that Hungary's voting rights are going to be stripped from the European Parliament, which, again, it just is the most ironic of punishments against a nation that is supposedly violating democracy, right? But that final stage to strip a nation of its voting rights, it does require a unanimous vote along the way that few analysts believe is even remotely capable of happening in the EU. And so, again, I'm not sure what the European Parliament was trying to accomplish here, since in the meantime, while they waste away countless weeks, months, perhaps years discussing, squabbling, dialoguing, Viktor Orban shows absolutely no signs whatsoever backing down on this one. He rightly sees himself as a major leader in the true resistance going on in the world, right? The true resistance being those who want to overthrow the tyranny of globalism and restore their national sovereignty and cultural integrity. Viktor Orban is one of the major leaders, if not the major leader, of this nationalist resistance on the world stage, and there are just no signs that he will even begin to think about relinquishing such a title. Indeed, what it looks like is that he and the other major leaders in this nationalist revolt are going to use the parliament's vote as a mechanism to galvanize anti-EU forces for the upcoming elections in May. Orban said that Hungary will not even consider yielding to what he calls the blackmail of the EU, and he completely mocked and ridiculed the bullies in Brussels, saying that if they think they know better than the people of Hungary on how to run their nation, well then, you got another thing coming. You know where you can stick that. Every single nation, Orban says, every single nation has the right to organize its life in its own country. They will not be dictated to by the terms of those who live outside of their nation. They will not have their cultures, customs, and traditions redefined by a bunch of bullies in Brussels. Hungarians will decide what happens in Hungary. It's the Hungarian people that will decide if the nation secures its borders, or not. And it is the Hungarian people who will decide if Hungary is worth defending or not. Simply put, these matters will not be decided by the dictatorial whims of a bunch of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. That is ultimately what all of this comes down to, as far as Orban and tens of millions of others are concerned. Who gets to make these decisions regarding the sovereignty of a nation? Right? In the name of democracy, Brussels is demanding the right to dictate the decision of such questions to all their member nations. So in many ways, with the European parliamentary elections coming up in May, this vote to sanction Hungary may have done the complete opposite. It's not sanctioning Hungary. It may turn out to have been a vote that will completely upend the EU.